What are we collecting data for? Are we collecting data to justify the funding? Are we collating the data because it's a study of us? Are we being studied?
Hi and welcome to today's Roundtable event. Today we're bringing community leaders who work in mental health together for vital conversations which we hope will not only provide education and awareness of mental health within the community, but will also go towards advocating for systems change. We really hope you like it.
With black people 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act, we must ensure compulsory treatment does not deepen trauma but becomes a pathway to healing and dignity.
Really?
How can post-discharge care be reimagined so black service users return to community, not crisis, supported with culturally grounded ongoing help? I find this question really challenging because it makes a big assumption that black people come into the mental health system and that at the end of it there's this compulsory treatment order that can undo every experience they've already had within that system. So I find it really hard to reimagine post-discharge. Because I think that we need to go more upstream and ask why there aren't other people involved in the treatment of people when they are detained under the Mental Health Act. And I say that because often it's not just that they are detained 4 times more than, say, a white British person, it's that they are detained longer. So this is the part that this question misses out. I could be detained under the Mental Health Act and be in a ward for a year when my counterpart would have already been let out 3 weeks ago. So when we talk about compulsory treatment, a lot of that is because of the way that we keep people in hospitals for a year. By then they picked a medication that might work for them, but they're not any better than they were when they first went into hospital. So these compulsory treatments are usually about risk, about somebody being made to take the medication that has allowed them to even leave the ward. So I find it hard to reimagine how you would undo all of the trauma that they've experienced in the mental health system and even how they were brought in there, because often they are brought in by the police under Section 136. So there is a lot of reimagining's got to happen on this one, right? But if we were to reimagine, I would say that there needs to be community groups or organisations that look like these black patients that are allowed into wards to start that work long before somebody gets a compulsory order, and that the system itself, what will normally happen is you'll be let out into a supported accommodation that's cheap, or the cheapest that they probably can find. There isn't really any support there. We've got lots of people in Haringey shuffling around our borough. They're in supported accommodation. I could probably pick them out if you come with me, that literally spend all day walking around the borough, not having much to do. So this compulsory order doesn't actually, although it does say in the Mental Health Act, it does say there should be support services, but it doesn't give them the support that they probably should get. So I think it's about organisations like ours being involved, but much earlier, and probably we should be the only people that do discharge, because there's so much to undo from their experience of going into the mental health system. So this is a very challenging question because there are so many reasons they come into that mental health system. So it's almost like we're asking the wrong question. we're asking about the end of their journey instead of asking how the hell did they get in 4 times more than their counterpart. Why? What's going on in our mental health system that means black men come into the mental health system in this way? Because often their counterparts, it can be voluntary when it's never offered to us in that way. So I think there's lots of other bits that probably you could pull out of this question and discuss that would address this much better than what happens at the end when somebody's on a compulsory order that is a lot about their medication.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm happy to comment on this. I guess, we know that the Mental Health Act is over 40 years old, so as a legal framework, it's not really fit for purpose. The government is reforming it as we speak here today, and there's going to be some positive changes within it to better strengthen people's rights, their voice in the Mental Health Act. But for me, if we were to reimagine it, we wouldn't even have a Mental Health Act. Like, we shouldn't have a coercive pathway into support. Like, there's examples that we can look at around the world, like Italy. They have a model called the Trieste model, where they have a co-produced crisis pathway for people. So I do believe there's a world where people who live with severe mental illnesses like psychosis, schizophrenia, can get the help they need when they reach crisis without being detained by the police. That's my thought on it. And I think it goes back to all of the themes we were touching today, how we just have a very punitive, crisis-driven system altogether. And like you said, what can we be doing upstream to raise awareness? There's some great examples happening at the moment around neighbourhood mental health hubs. So Tower Hamlets in London being one of those models where people can get 24/7 support. But as you say, what is the support outside of that to help people with housing, with employment, with their families? All of these things need to be considered. And I think something we often overlook when we look at Mental Health Act statistics, the issues start in childhood as well. So we have black children are like 36% of those in mental health hospitals, but just 5% of those getting community mental health support, which is ridiculous. So if they were to get that community support, again, 3/4 of mental health problems have their roots in adolescence. If we just focus much earlier, provide that community-based support, the work you guys all do, for communities, it would make such a big difference.
I agree. I think listening to that question, I was thinking the thereafter is but an element of it, because also when people are discharged, what does that wraparound, all-around community support look like, but whole person support look like, and for how long as well, because that's also limited. But I completely agree, and I think when you're looking at intergenerational trauma, transgenerational trauma, when you're looking at the system, the UK system and the experiences intergenerationally, and even for that individual within their care, when the care system now, I think it's impossible for us to not speak to the effects that the past has had on how our system looks to support as best they can in some way, I don't know, black and global majority people. But I do think it is about looking, like you're saying, looking at the before. There is always a pattern, and I think our system isn't wonderful at picking up what those patterns are before somebody gets to that extent of being institutionalized. And it's also the cycle of institutionalization is much higher for black and global majority people. So even if we're saying, okay, what happens when people are discharged, how long is that support happening, and then how are we making sure people are not dropping back into that cycle of institutionalization much more than white-bodied people might be. So I think it's a question of before that moment, I completely agree, and then it's also, as a system, how are we decolonizing the system to ensure that it doesn't perpetuate something that has already occurred within history and doesn't also continue to paint the same picture.
Well, these figures have probably been like this for about 20 years. So the other thing is the message that puts out to our communities, particularly black men, about what happens to you when you get to the system, or what help actually looks like for you. What help looks like for you being detained, you being kept there a lot longer, you getting medication that other people wouldn't receive, and then not being allowed out under your own free will, but under an order that means that at any point they can bring you back into the hospitals.
And I know that I'm seeing arms waving for time, but there's also something I think about when we're looking at those individuals working within those institutions, within those systems. It's also our responsibility to, when it comes to the word training, but when it comes to upskilling, when it comes to what work we're doing on the inside, for the inside, to ensure that these racialized systems are not continuing. I think it's not just realizing, you know, yes, people have to see people that look like them, but there's the reality, we live in a multicultural society. There are nuances, there are different intersections that are at play when people are getting support and when people leave that support. So we also need to ensure that we're looking at it in a branch of multiculturalism, because that is what our society is. And that's how, when it comes to decolonizing work and when it comes to looking at that racialized work, we need to ensure we're doing it in reflection to the world that we live in as well.
So can I just pick up on a point you made there about having people that look like you? If you've ever been to a mental health ward, you would see that the staff that work there are black. Yeah, particularly in a borough like ours where like 98% of the people on the wards are black men or of other denominations. So the other thing is the way that we're used within these systems to actually keep our people in that system, which we need to look at. And why is it that those people aren't the clinical lead or director, etc.? Why are they the people keeping our people locked up, medicated, and in some of these spaces for a very long time when they shouldn't be?